welcome to another good time on Homo Politicos. This is Enterprise TV. Very pleased to be here to have this conversation today. Yeah, you don't know the conversation yet, but it's quite important and very important conversation we're having today on the program. So welcome again to the broadcast. Kingsley Bass is my name. Well, the discourse surrounding genetically modified organisms, popularly called GMOs, in Nigeria and across Africa is multifaceted. Well, fondly, it's encompassing scientific, economic, ethical, and media dimensions. And recent reports have highlighted instances where allegedly journalists have been commissioned to write in support of genetically mutilated organisms use, and that has added to the complexity to the ongoing debate. Well, in the evolving landscape of agricultural biotechnology, the media plays a pivotal role in shaping public perception, and that's why this conversation is very important. Reports have surfaced suggesting that certain journalists in Nigeria have been commissioned to produce content favorable to the debate on genetically modified organisms. For instance, investigative journalist, that's David Hundeyin, has claimed that the British government and some other persons are funding some Nigerian journalists to push out articles that are in favor of genetically modified organism food in Nigeria. Now, this revelation raises questions about the objectivity of information disseminated to the public. While commissioned articles can provide insight into the benefits of GMOs, they may also lead to biased reporting, potentially overshadowing legitimate concerns about biosafety, environmental impact, and socioeconomic implications. And that's why this conversation is one that we should have. Well, just recently, David Hundeyin, as I mentioned, did make the list of journalists he claims have been commissioned, right, were part of certain persons, journalists commissioned to write in support of genetically modified organisms. And one of such person is Larry Olagunju. Larry Olagunju is the editor at Check Climate Africa. He joins me today on the program to provide clarity on these accusations. Larry, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Monsieur, for having me, Basi.
Yeah, I appreciate your stopping by the studio today. Well, I'm sure that you are not, in fact, as a matter of fact, you were tagged to that post by David Hundeyin, and you are not ignorant of the several conversations on social media this past 1 week or so around genetically modified organism and the dangers thereof, and the fact that a lot of persons have thrown accusations here and there, particularly David Hundeyin. How do you address that matter?
So first of all, I would like to say that I'm not a certified genetic engineering expert. Neither am I into biotechnology. Essentially, I'm a journalist. However, I also have a science background. I think that ongoing conversations that are scientific should be left to the science. And when we begin to interfere and begin to have ethnic, political colorations and economic alignment, our economic alignment or interest to conversations that are basically scientific, we might begin to distort the fact. I think that the conversation around GMO is ongoing. I totally understand that issues around climate change, because of my background, issues around food insecurity,
yes,
are the basics for scientists coming together to say how can we solve this problem on a land scale. However, some of the solutions that are being touted have not been concluded. They're not conclusive yet. So I think that each time we had our political affiliations or interest to them, then we get it a little messed up. So I think for now, we should allow the science come to the conclusion. I, for instance, because like I said initially, I'm not an expert in that field. I never wrote about GMOs. So I was even surprised when I got the tag that I've been writing about GMOs. I never wrote about it. Never. Because if you're not certified to write about something, what do you want to educate people on that subject?
It's interesting that you mentioned that, but we know that as journalists, especially when the conversation around climate change and the rest popped, journalists we've seen several situations where journalists would be trained, on the subject matter, and then further given tools to study the subject matter so they can report on the subject matter, right? Well, that is there, and that is established. But to say that we should completely leave that's another point of view completely. But what do you say about directly to these accusations? Because he provided documents to support his accusation, to say that, oh, look at the names. He mentioned a few names like Gbemisola Adebowale, Silas Jonathan, Kunle Adebayo, Liru Dairu, Liu, Rejoice Tadi, Samad Uthman, Rosemary Ajayi, and a few other names, including Hamza, Ibrahim, Samuel Olaniran, as well as your name. In fact, he further alleged that there was some form of camping, for the training and the rest to get to provide details for this set of journalists, yourself inclusive, going by what he said, to get to report on this. Are you saying that categorically you were not part of this set of people, or you've never been reached out to by an international organization or something?
So I think it's important that we dissect the conversations carefully.
Yes.
On the issue of GMO,
yes,
I think that, for instance, I'm an open source investigation expert. An avid person who is good at using some of the open source tools, or even Google, can check if, for instance, myself or even yourself have written about this particular topic. And even if, because of this uproar on social media, I've decided to delete that content, an open source investigation person who is versed in this can check and see, okay, this person once sometimes wrote this, okay, this post was deleted at some point or the other. I, for instance, have never written about that. So saying that I think that the person who alleged should have actually gone a step further to bring, and do an analysis of the kind of stories that I've reported or I've written about, say in the last 2 years, in the last 5 years. I told you that my background is in climate, in meteorology, and that gives me a bit of a good ability to write on climate change issues. However, as a journalist, we all have our international affiliations. I've been trained by organizations like CFA and a couple of them. And then sometimes you have the trainees here, sometimes you have the training outside of the country. Yes, I have an affiliation to the NGO called Center for Information Resilience, outrightly. They have been very instrumental in training journalists across Africa on open source investigation and things like that. But to say categorically that he's paid certain journalists to write about this particular, that's not true. I have never written. I don't even plan to write about that.
Let me quote David Udein specifically. He said that a London-based non-governmental organization founded by 2 British ex-spies and funded by US Aid is paying 10 well-known Nigerian journalists £333 per month to write smear pieces tagging pan-Africanist and anti-GMO campaigners as pro-Kremlin. And that's a breaking story he's working on. That's what he posted directly, his exact words. And it sounds, from this, it sounds like, okay, this is not directly, he's not saying directly that you have written, or this person that is mentioned have written on this. And this is based of what you just mentioned, that okay, open source investigators can go check and verify, at least in past 2 years, has this person written this, has this person written that. But it's saying here that you and those 9 other persons is alleging that you've been paid to write smear pieces, smear reports against persons who speak against genetically modified organisms. Is that true?
Paid to write smear pieces. I also think that you should have samples. Did this project start today? I think I'll also put that question out there, even though I don't even want to answer it. Because it seems, I don't like a case whereby journalists are beginning to speak. The journalism space is quite small, and that space is very important because it's instrumental to ensure that people get the right information. The ideal for me as a journalist is to ensure that disinformation doesn't cloud our policy making processes, to ensure that disinformation doesn't cloud our ability to make good decisions. Take, for instance, the last election in Nigeria. We saw, huge traffic of disinformation shared on social media. And my concern in that case is that when people take decisions, elect office holders, do things based on faulty information, the society is generally not better for it. So I think that when our conversations are clouded by issues around ethnicity, our political alignment, and economic interest, we have this kind of challenge that we have. Like I said, every journalist aspires to have international affiliations and award and things like that. What's the essence of being a journalist if you're going to stay in your cocoon in Makoko or somewhere? As a journalist, you have to travel the world. That's going to inspire the way you even report and the way you write. So talking about being paid, the narrative sounds like as if these journalists have been paid, like you said, to smear.
Like he said, please.
Oh, like you quoted him anyways. Are there samples on the internet that we can show? There was also an allegation about writing to smear the president of the country. Where are there? You should have reports that says that this person has been doing this before now. And so until then, I don't think we even have a solid basis for that conversation.
Another point.
Because please hold on.
Yes.
Because even in fact checking, you cannot fact check what's. So if I say that you're going to wear a red tie tomorrow, that's not fact checkable because that's in the future. So if you're alleging that I've been paid to do something, and you're calling me, we've seen names like traitor, all sorts of names on social media. You don't even have an evidence for that.
So you are saying categorically that you were not paid to write anti-smear campaigns?
There were incentives for being on the projects. Every media organization is being funded by one agency locally or internationally. For instance, Mercator is one of the good funders of media projects in Nigeria.
Yes.
So there are people who fund projects, and journalists are sometimes funded to do an investigation and do a report.
Yeah, on specific projects.
Exactly. And the point of alignment, I'm going to speak for myself. I cannot speak for every other person that they mentioned in that group because that's not right. The point of alignment with me and this NGO is the fact that they are pro-democracy and they are also careful at ensuring that disinformation doesn't cloud our conversations, most especially disinformation that comes from outside of the country. And you have also seen things that have happened in the Sahel region in Africa, in Nigeria, and then we also seen issues whereby there are conversations around disinformation that are tending to ensure that Nigeria turns into a military regime or something like that. And I, for instance, I'm a proponent of democracy anytime, any day. So that's the ideal that aligns me with this organization. And the fact that they provide journalists with skills. How many of the media offices in Nigeria or in Africa are even able to, in Nigeria, let me say specifically, are able to give many of the modern tools and technologies? Many of the countries are ahead of us. So in my own instance, there's an alignment with this organization, and then there are incentives to do this investigation and do this research. And I think that is very basic. That's easy to understand.
All right. Oh well, so there's still a lot more to uncover as regards this, and you've clearly said that your affiliation, you clearly stated your affiliation, but he's provided, and this is in the public domain, is provided on his social media handle documents too, which can be checked, can be verified. But then this conversation essentially is about clearing, making clarifications, right? And you've said categorically that you will not. All right. Let's talk about some of the works that you've done, right? Especially with this organization. Suppose you quoted the MacArthur Foundation, right? Some of the works that you've done with them. You've mentioned too that it's been strictly focused on pro-democracy subject matters, right? You want to state more on this, and you have the opportunity now to let the world know what you've been writing about, what you are focused on. For example, you've been introduced on the program as the editor of Check Climate Africa, right? So you want to speak very quickly on that?
Yes, so that we can be clear, you
Yeah.
mentioned MacArthur Foundation. That was just an illustration.
Okay.
Yes, I think the NGO in question here is CIR, and many people on social media have related them to being a spy and things like that. But how do you find a spy who has a LinkedIn account, who has a website? CIR stands for Center for Information Resilience. They have a website. People can go there to check. You know, they have an address in the UK. People can go there to check. So I really do not want to speak about another organization. I've told you clearly that what they do is that they provide trainings for journalists. And
You
then,
work with them. You've worked with them.
yes,
in the
I've
past.
worked with them.
Okay.
There are tools that I have access to right now because of their support, trainings, and things like that. And as a journalist in this new time, especially in the advent of AI, you really know that you really need to up your skills per time, or else before you know it, you're still and probably out of the market. But the truth is, relating individuals to spy and all of that, I really do not really want to speak to that, because I said, check them on the internet, check their footprints, and then until then, I don't think that's important. But for me, like I said initially, the alignment is this, that they provide training, they are pro-democracy, and for me, that's cool.
Yes, your work, some of the works that you've done, what exactly have your works been focused on? Do you have intentions to, in the future, in the near future, whether in the long run, to write on genetically modified organisms?
So absolutely, this is an ongoing conversation. When there's a conclusion, for instance, and then the facts are there. I mean, as a science-trained person, yes, when the facts are there, why shouldn't I, as a journalist, I have a role to educate the people? So I give a very clear example. During the COVID-19 pandemic, there were a lot of back and forths with the COVID virus. At some point, they said it was airborne. Yes, they stay on surfaces and things like that. I think some people actually bleach their surfaces at home, And you realize that during that period, what was the facts like 2 days ago changes. And right now, the expert on TV providing day-to-day updates on things that you found out. So with respect to the GMO as well, I understand that there's a problem of food insecurity that is also being amplified by insecurity and other factors affecting food supply. At the end of the day, when we come to a conclusion on GMO, and hopefully I think that the conclusions on GMO will be void, of all of these political sentiments and interest, economic interest sentiments. At that point in time, when the facts are there, I have a role as a journalist to educate the people. And should I find this information on social media after the facts are clearly there? Because many of these allegations are without substance. They have said it leads to, is it infertility, is it cancer, and all of that. Yes, I think that the research will be concluded, and then we would have a direction globally that we are following. If we are going to settle for GMO to solve the problem of food crisis, why not? If we find out eventually that this is not the way to go, and that we are going to be going somewhere else, why not?
You don't know that several Western nations have banned, the use of genetically modified organisms in their country. Some, I think Mexico, as in the South American region, have been pushing for that as well. And yes, like you said, conversations continue to unfold in that regard. It's still developing, and they're thought for and thought against.
Yes.
But speaking closely to your last thought about when you would eventually write on this, or when you eventually would want to settle for writing for that on the matter, considering the several reports of the likes of Denmark and the rest who have banned this, do you think really that there is no clarity as to the fact at this point, the fact that this is not good or this is good?
So yes, it's okay for the Mexican system of government to say that this is not good for our people, and then they have a direction. That is clear. But we live in Nigeria, and the question is, what has the Nigerian government decided? At some point, I think NAFDAC was speaking in line with saying that they support the innovation around the telomeres and GMO. At some point again, there was a particular interview, I think it was on Arise TV, where Dr. Adeye clearly said that NAFDAC is not in approval of GMO, which is like a 360 U-turn from what they have always pushed for, or what they've always stood for, which is fine. I'm not an expert in that regard. So what I would rather advise is they speed up the processes of the research and they will come to a conclusion. But the challenge is that this information is like an hindrance in speeding up many of these conversations so that we can come to conclusion. And it's not just this information, it is information fueled by politics, by interest. For instance, I have an investment in that regard, and I can even say that I'm going to make a lot of money. But we should put the life of people first before politics and before money. So I think that by the time the Nigerian system comes to a conclusion that is scientific, and then we can have a direction on that.
All right. So we've been speaking with the editor at Check Climate Africa, Larry Olagunju. I would like to thank you so much for stopping by and for making making clarification as to this particular subject matter and the allegations by David Udeni. Unfortunately, we couldn't get David to be part of the conversation today. Hopefully, we get his reply on this subject matter. Maybe provide further clarity on his document and his findings too. But Larry has just said here, and it's on record, he has never been part of the process. But yes, Larry, thank you so much again for stopping by. We truly appreciate your being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And the conversation about genetically modified organisms and the impacts of that on the agricultural space and indeed the economy of Nigeria continues. Not just Nigeria, but the entire African continent. Well, that continues, and we'll keep tabs with these conversations and get talking some more about them in subsequent episodes of the program. In the meantime, thank you so much for being a part of our Homo Politicus today. Kingsley Bass is my name. I'd love to hear what you make of this conversation in the comment section. I'll be listening, I'll be watching, and I'll be reading as well. So hey, let's get talking there. Until next time, bye for now.